Today's book is Rip Van Winkle. Now, it's a classic. It is adapted from Washington Irving's legend, and it's by Dorothy Bell Riggs with illustrations by Ann Sellers Lee. So, let's look. In a village near the Catskill Mountains, Rip Van Winkle led a carefree life in a tumble-down old house with his children and his wife. On a bench beside the village inn, through a long summer's day, Rip and his friends would sit and talk the hours away. Rip was a special friend of the village boys and girls. He flew their kites, he played their games, and he mended all their toys. "While you mend toys," cries his wife, "the roof in our house is leaking." But Rip Van Winkle and his dog took to the woods while his angry spouse was speaking. As the mountains cast their shadow and the sun sank low in the sky, Rip had beheld a man with a keg climbing a path nearby. Rip hastened to offer assistance, and much to his surprise, he found a dwarf-like fellow with a flowing beard and beady eyes. Not a word had the stranger spoken as they climbed to the mountaintop. Sounds of thunder rumbled and rolled, and the little man motioned Rip to stop. The peals of thunder grew closer, rumbling and rolling. Rip saw through the trees an open spot where he saw little men bowling. They were all dressed like his companion. They must have been 8 or 10. They started and looked at Rip with silence and turned to their game again. The ball made a noisy rumble as it rolled on the ground. It knocked the 9 pins down with a crashing sound. Rip grew weary of watching this odd company at play. He sat down to rest, but alas, he fell asleep right away. The birds were singing when Rip woke up, and the sun was shining bright. "What excuse shall I give my wife for sleeping here all night?" He didn't know that he was old, with a beard that was long and white, or that he had slept for 20 years instead of just one night. He whistled and called for his dog, but Wolf was nowhere about. All he could hear were the echoes returning his whistle and shout. So Rip picked up his rusty gun, and hungry now for food, he hobbled slowly home again in a sad and troubled mood. When he reached the village, people stopped to stare, for Rip was a sight to behold, with his ragged clothes and his long white hair. Nobody knew Rip Van Winkle? Does nobody know Rip Van Winkle? His eyes were filled with tears. "Rip Van Winkle," said 2 or 3. "He's been gone away for like 20 years. "It's Rip Van Winkle," said an old woman as she tottered to his side. "Where have you been these 20 years? And here are your children," she cried. On the bench beside the village inn, as in the days long past, Rip would tell his story to strangers when they asked. To this day, when the village children hear thunder rumbling and rolling, they say the little men in the mountains are bowling. Rip Van Winkle.